The transport shuttle rattled through Luminara Prime's opal atmosphere like a tin can full of nervous hopes. Nessa Reeve pressed her forehead against the window, watching crystalline spires pierce through pearl-colored clouds. Her supervisor's words echoed in her mind. Just keep the plants alive for 6 months. Don't talk to royalty. Don't make eye contact. Don't exist louder than a whisper. She'd nodded at all the appropriate times, but honestly, Nessa had never been good at being invisible. Plants needed talking to. They needed someone to notice when their leaves curled or their stems drooped. In her experience, being invisible was just another word for being careless. The Palace of Eternal Twilight didn't sit on ground. It floated, suspended between 3 moons by some ancient technology that made Nessa's stomach flip. Gardens spiraled around its exterior like green ribbons wrapped around a gift no one dared open. As she stepped onto the landing platform, the air tasted like honey and electricity, sweet enough to make her teeth ache. "You are the Earth specialist?" The attendant barely looked at her, already walking toward the service entrance. Her skin shimmered like oil on water, beautiful and untouchable. Botanist, yes. Nessa Reeve from... The head gardener will show you to the specimens. Do not wander. Do not disturb the royal family. The Queen Mother does not tolerate disruptions. Nessa wanted to ask what counted as a disruption, but decided her questions qualified. She followed silently through corridors that hummed with bioluminescent moss, past windows that showed impossible angles of sky, until they reached a greenhouse that took her breath away and then gave it back as disappointment. The greenhouse was dying. Not dramatically, no withered husks or brown decay, but quietly. The way things died when no one paid attention. Leaves pale as ghosts, stems brittle as old promises. The head gardener, an ancient luminary whose skin had faded to dove gray, gestured vaguely at the space. 6 months. Make them presentable. The Queen Mother walks here on the anniversary of... He paused, something painful crossing his face. Just fix them. Then he left. Nessa stood alone in the sad greenhouse, surrounded by plants that had forgotten how to thrive. She set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and did what she always did when faced with suffering she couldn't explain. She started paying attention. "Okay," she murmured, approaching a drooping fern-like plant with silver fronds. "Let's see what's wrong. Temperature? Light? Are they overwatering you, sweetheart? Underwatering?" She checked the soil, too dry. Checked the light sensors, too dim. Made notes in her battered tablet. She didn't notice the 2 figures standing in the shadowed archway. Didn't see their eyes widen as she touched each plant like it mattered. Didn't hear the younger one whisper to her sister. She talks to them. For 3 weeks, Nessa followed the same routine. Dawn to dusk in the greenhouse, hands dirty, back aching, talking constantly. She told the plants about Terra Firma 8, about her apartment that smelled like compost and coffee, about her neighbor who played terrible music through thin walls. She told them about her mother who'd taught her that everything living wanted the same thing, to be seen. The plants responded. Slowly, reluctantly, like people learning to trust again, new growth appeared on the silver fern. A vine that had refused to climb suddenly reached upward. The air in the greenhouse began to smell less like sadness and more like earth. On the 23rd day, Nessa found it, a starflower tucked in the darkest corner, almost dead. Its petals, which should have glowed like captured sunlight, were gray, translucent, barely there. She'd read about starflowers. They were bonded plants, grown from seeds carried by 2 people in love. They bloomed brightest when both were alive, dimmed when one died, and turned to crystal when both were gone. This one was dying but not crystallizing, which meant... "You're still waiting," Nessa whispered, kneeling beside it. "Someone's still here, aren't they? But you're so tired of waiting." From the shadows, Princess Stellara felt her breath catch. Beside her, Moonveil gripped her hand tightly. Their mother's starflower, their father's starflower, the one the Queen Mother hadn't been able to look at for 15 years. The plant they'd all pretended wasn't dying by inches, and this human, this stranger with dirt under her fingernails and an off-world accent, saw it, saw what it needed. Nessa spent the next week with the starflower. She adjusted its light, its water, its soil composition. She brought it minerals from the palace's geological collection, tested pH levels, consulted every botanical database she could access. She talked to it constantly, told it stories about earth flowers that bloomed in impossible places, cracks in concrete, volcanic slopes, frozen tundra. You can keep going, she told it one evening, exhausted, her voice cracking. I know you're tired. I know it's been so long, but there's still someone who remembers. Someone who planted you with love, and love doesn't just disappear because time passes. It changes shape, gets quieter, but it's still there. You're still there. She touched the nearest petal gently. So let's try again tomorrow, okay? The princesses watched from their hidden vantage point as Nessa finally left for the night, stumbling with fatigue. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Moonveil whispered, She doesn't know who we are. No, Stellara agreed softly. She just knows what needs caring for. Should we? Not yet. But soon. They left silently, their own hearts doing something they hadn't done in years. Hoping. The next morning, Nessa arrived to find the starflower's petals holding the faintest hint of gold. Not much, just a promise. Just enough to make her cry there in the empty greenhouse. Tears falling on leaves that had forgotten what it meant to bloom. She didn't see Queen Mother Celestria standing in the archway, one hand pressed to her mouth, her crystalline eyes wide with something between grief and wonder. Didn't see the queen slowly approach the star flower she'd been unable to face, hadn't touched since the day her beloved died. Didn't see Celestria kneel beside it, her royal robes pooling on the floor, and whisper words in a language older than starlight. But she felt it. That shift in the air when something that's been frozen begins to thaw. When Nessa turned, the queen was gone. But the starflower's petals had brightened another degree, and on the soil beside it sat a small crystal pendant on a silver chain. Traditional luminary gratitude token, worth more than Nessa would earn in 5 years. She picked it up carefully, then hung it on the nearest branch where the starflower could see it, could remember it was valued. She noticed you, Nessa told the plant. Whoever she is, she noticed. That night, Princess Stellara and Princess Moonveil appeared in the greenhouse doorway just as Nessa was packing up. They wore simple robes instead of formal dress. Their hair, one midnight blue, one silver white, unbound and flowing. They were the most beautiful beings Nessa had ever seen, and she nearly dropped her tablet. Please don't stop working, Stellara said quickly, her voice like wind chimes. We only wanted to... We've been watching you, Nessa's heart hammered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Am I in trouble? I was just trying to... You saved our mother's starflower, Moonveil interrupted, her silver eyes bright. No one's been able to touch it for 15 years. Gardeners tried. Specialists tried. They all said it was too late, that we should let it crystallize with dignity. But you didn't, Stellara continued. You saw it was still fighting and you fought with it. Nessa looked between them, confused. It's what you do. When something's alive and trying, you don't give up on it. You just keep showing up until it's ready to bloom again. She paused. Who's your mother? The princesses shared a glance. Then Moonveil smiled, small and sad and genuine. Come back tomorrow, same time. We'll tell you everything. And Nessa, Stellara added, already turning to leave. Thank you for talking to them. The plants. We'd forgotten they needed that. We'd forgotten we needed it too. They disappeared into the palace shadows, leaving Nessa standing in the greenhouse with shaking hands and a chest full of questions. She looked back at the starflower, its petals now definitely golden in the dim light. What have I gotten myself into? She whispered. The starflower's glow brightened just slightly, as if to say, something that matters. And in the highest tower of the Palace of Eternal Twilight, Queen Mother Celestria stood at her window watching the greenhouse lights, watching the human who'd reminded her that some things, even broken, grieving things, could still choose to bloom. She touched the matching pendant at her throat, twin to the one she'd left beside the starflower, and allowed herself to feel something she'd forbidden for 15 years. Possibility. Nessa didn't sleep. She lay in her tiny quarters, a converted storage room that smelled like ozone and recycled air, staring at the ceiling and replaying the princess's words. Our mother's starflower, which meant their mother was, she sat up abruptly, Queen Mother Celestria, the ruler of Luminara Prime, the widow who'd locked herself away after her consort's death, who governed through holograms and written decrees, who hadn't been seen in public for over a decade. Nessa had just spent 3 weeks talking to her dead husband's plant like it was a depressed houseplant. "Oh, no," she whispered to the darkness. "Oh, no, no, no." But dawn came anyway, indifferent to her panic. She arrived at the greenhouse early, half hoping the princesses had been a sleep-deprived hallucination. Instead, she found them already there, sitting cross-legged beside the starflower like children at story time. They'd brought tea in delicate crystal cups that floated without being held. "You came," Moonveil said, her face lighting up. "I work here," Nessa replied carefully, "though I'm guessing I should have been bowing or something yesterday." "I didn't realize—" "Please don't." Stellara's voice was firm but kind. "We spent 3 weeks watching you treat every plant in here with more respect than most people show us. You bow to the things that matter." "We saw." Nessa set down her bag slowly. "You've been watching me for 3 weeks?" "We watch everyone," Moonveil admitted. "It's what happens when you're royal. You learn to observe from shadows, because stepping into light means performance, expectation, protocol." She gestured to the greenhouse. "But you were different. You didn't perform. You just cared. The plants needed someone to care." Nessa knelt beside the starflower, checking its soil moisture by habit. "Your father planted this?" "With our mother, yes." Stellara's voice softened. "On their bonding day." Luminary tradition. 2 people, 1 seed, grown together. When he died, it began dying too. Mother couldn't bear to see it suffer, so she ordered the greenhouse closed. But she couldn't order it destroyed either, so it just lingered. "Like her," Moonveil added quietly. "Like all of us." Nessa looked at them, really looked. Stellara's midnight blue hair had lost some of its luster at the tips. Moonveil's silver eyes held shadows that didn't match her young face. They were beautiful the way abandoned temples were beautiful, stunning and sad and slowly crumbling. "How long since you've felt happy?" Nessa asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. The princesses stared at her. Then Stellara laughed, a small, broken sound. "That's a very human question, is it? Seems pretty universal to me." "Luminaries don't discuss emotions openly," Moonveil explained. "We express through light, through song, through the glow of our skin. Words are for lesser things." "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," Nessa said bluntly. "So you're all just walking around glowing your feelings at each other? What if someone doesn't understand? What if you need to say, 'I'm scared,' or 'I miss him,' or 'this hurts and I don't know how to make it stop'?" Stellara's luminescence flickered, a brief flash of pale blue that Nessa instinctively understood as surprise. "You see? You translated that without training. Most species can't. Maybe most species aren't paying attention." Nessa returned to examining the starflower. "Your mother visits here, doesn't she? Not when anyone's watching, but she comes." "How did you know?" Moonveil breathed, the pendant. "And the soil here was disturbed yesterday. Someone knelt beside it. Plus, plants respond to presence. This one's been getting stronger not just from my care, but from something else. Someone else." She touched a golden petal gently. "She still loves him. It's still growing because she hasn't let go." "Our tutors say letting go is weakness," Stellara said, but her voice held doubt. "Your tutors are idiots." Nessa stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Letting go isn't moving on, it's moving through. Your mother's not weak. She's just stuck. The whole kingdom's stuck." As if summoned by her words, the greenhouse temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The floating teacups fell, shattering on stone. Every plant suddenly wilted, their leaves curling inward like hands making fists. "No, no, no!" Nessa lunged for the starflower. But frost was already spreading across its petals. "The whisper!" Moonveil gasped, her skin flashing warning crimson. "Stellara, it's manifesting." From the shadows between the plants, something emerged. Not solid, not liquid, but absence given form. It looked like smoke sculpted into the suggestion of a figure, tall, faceless, wrapped in veils of gray that moved against wind that wasn't blowing. Where it passed, color drained, sound muted. Even the air felt thinner. Nessa had never seen anything like it, but she knew immediately what it was: grief made manifest. The accumulated sorrow of an entire kingdom given shape by 15 years of unprocessed mourning. "Get behind us," Stellara commanded, stepping forward with her sister. Their skin blazed with protective light, casting the whisper into sharp relief. But Nessa was already moving, not backward, but toward her bag. "How do you fight it?" "You can't!" Moonveil's voice pitched high. "It feeds on joy, on hope, on any positive emotion. It erases happiness from memory. Our mother's court tried to banish it for years. Soldiers, mages, scholars. Did anyone try talking to it?" Nessa pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "Talk to... It's not sentient. It's a phenomenon, a manifestation of collective... Everything sentient if you pay attention." Nessa found what she was looking for. Her research notes on emotional resonance in plant networks. Long shot, but worth trying. She grabbed a watering can, dumped in a specific mixture of nutrients, and began pouring it over the starflower's roots while addressing the whisper directly. "You're here because no one's acknowledged you, right? Everyone's been trying to banish you, fight you, pretend you don't exist. But you're real. The grief is real." The whisper moved closer. Frost spread from where it stood, climbing the greenhouse walls. "Nessa, stop!" Stellara pleaded. But Nessa kept talking, kept watering, kept her hand steady even though her heart was hammering. "I get it. I lost my dad when I was 12. Aneurysm. One minute he was teaching me how to propagate succulents, the next he was gone. And everyone kept saying, move on and be strong, and he'd want you to be happy. But I wasn't happy. I was angry and sad and lost, and pretending otherwise just made it worse." The whisper paused. "So I started talking to plants. Because plants don't tell you how to feel. They just grow or they don't. They're honest. And slowly I realized grief isn't something you defeat. It's something you make space for. You water it like a seed and let it grow into something else. Something that hurts less. Something that remembers without destroying." The starflower beneath her hands began to glow, not bright, but steady. Warm. "You're part of this kingdom," Nessa continued, her voice cracking. "You're what happens when people love deeply and lose deeply and don't know where to put all that depth. But you don't have to erase joy to exist. There's room for both. There's always room for both." The whisper reached out with tendrils of gray smoke, not attacking, but hesitating, questioning. Moonveil's eyes widened. "It's listening." "Of course it is." Nessa sat back on her heels, exhausted. "Pain always listens when you stop trying to fight it." The greenhouse door opened with a sound like breaking crystal. Queen Mother Celestria entered, and the temperature plummeted further. She wore robes of deep indigo, her hair, the same midnight blue as Stellara's, shot through with silver. Her skin held no glow, just matte gray exhaustion. She looked at the whisper, at her daughters, at Nessa. Then she knelt beside the starflower. "I've been a coward," Celestria said, her voice resonant as temple bells. "I let my grief become a cage. For myself, for my daughters, for my people. I've been so afraid of forgetting him that I've forgotten how to live." The whisper moved closer, circling her. "But this human..." Celestria touched the starflower's glowing petals. "She showed me that tending to pain is different than drowning in it. She talked to my husband's memory like it mattered. Like he mattered. Not the consort, not the legend, but the person who liked his tea too sweet and sang off-key and once spent 3 hours trying to teach a palace mouse to dance." Stellara made a choked sound. "I forgot he did that. I forgot his laugh," Moonveil whispered. "When did I forget his laugh?" "That's what I've been most afraid of," Celestria admitted. "Forgetting. So I froze everything. The palace, the kingdom, myself, trying to preserve a moment that was already gone. But preservation isn't love. It's just fear wearing a prettier name." She stood facing the whisper directly. "You're my creation. My grief made real. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let you grow so large and terrible. I'm sorry I fed you by refusing to feel anything else. But I'm here now. I'm feeling now. And I'm asking you, stay if you need to, but let us grow alongside you. The whisper trembled. Then slowly it began to change. The gray didn't disappear but shifted, becoming less like smoke and more like silk. Less suffocating, more embracing. It wrapped around Celestria not as a shroud, but as a shawl, gentle as memory. And where it touched her, her skin began to glow again, soft amber, like sunset through stained glass. The frost receded. The plants straightened. The starflower blazed with golden light so bright it cast their shadows on the greenhouse walls in sharp relief. Nessa released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. So, we're not dying? No, Celestria said, and she was smiling. Nessa spent 3 days hiding in the palace archives, pretending to research luminary botany while actually having a quiet crisis among the floating data crystals. The head archivist, an elderly luminary named Torvin, whose skin had faded to pearl white, brought her tea without comment and pointed her toward obscure texts about interspecies bonding traditions. You're not the first human to catch royal attention, he said mildly on the 3rd day, setting down a cup of something that smelled like chamomile and starlight, though you might be the first one who didn't seek it. Nessa looked up from a scroll describing ancient courtship rituals. What happened to the others? Most ran. One stayed, but tried to change everything about himself to fit. Lasted 2 years before the loneliness ate him alive. Torvin's eyes were kind. The trick isn't becoming luminary. It's staying yourself while learning to glow in the dark. I don't glow. Don't you? He gestured to the starflower cutting she'd brought with her, a small stem she'd propagated, now sitting in a glass of water on her research table. It was blooming tiny golden flowers despite having almost no roots. You make things grow in impossible conditions. That's its own kind of light. After he left, Nessa stared at the cutting for a long time. Then she picked up her tablet and messaged the princesses. Can we talk? Real talk, no protocol. They met her in the greenhouse at midnight, when the 3 moons aligned and turned the palace silver. Stellara brought blankets. Moonvale brought human chocolate she'd somehow acquired, slightly melted and incredibly thoughtful. They sat in a circle around the starflower like conspirators. I need you to understand something, Nessa started, breaking off a piece of chocolate. I'm not graceful. I'm not elegant, I snore. I forget to comb my hair. I once killed a cactus, through sheer negligence. And I talk to plants because sometimes they're easier than people. We know, Stellara said simply. We've been watching you, remember? And you still— Why? Nessa's voice cracked. Why me? You're literal princesses. You could have anyone in 7 galaxies. Moonvale wrapped a blanket around Nessa's shoulders. Because everyone else in 7 galaxies sees the crowns first. You saw us. When you approached the starflower that first day, Stellara added, her midnight blue hair catching moonlight. You didn't see a royal relic or a political symbol. You saw something suffering that deserved care. You treated our father's memory with more tenderness than entire delegations have shown our mother. And when we revealed ourselves, you didn't bow or panic or try to impress us, Moonvale continued. You just asked how long it had been since we felt happy. Do you know how radical that question was? How revolutionary? Nessa pulled the blanket tighter. On Earth, that's just basic human concern. Exactly. Stellara's eyes glowed soft amber. You're teaching us to be basic, to be simple, to be honest. Those are the most precious gifts in a world built on protocol and performance. But I don't know how to be a royal anything, Nessa protested. I don't know your customs, your languages, your— Then don't be royal, Moonvale interrupted gently. Be ours. Be the person who talks to plants and saves dying things and asks uncomfortable questions. We don't need you to be luminary. We need you to teach us how to be more human. The starflower between them pulsed with warmth as if agreeing. Nessa looked at them. Really looked. Stellara's careful composure that hid a desperate need to be reckless. Moonvale's bright energy that masked deep loneliness. 2 people who'd spent their lives performing perfect princess and were suffocating under the weight of expectation. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, but we do this my way. Slow, honest, no pedestals. I'm going to mess up constantly. And you have to promise to tell me, instead of just glowing passive-aggressively about it. Both princesses burst into startled laughter, the first genuine laughter Nessa had heard from them. Deal, Stellara managed, wiping her eyes. Though we make no promises about the passive-aggressive glowing, Moonveil added, grinning. It's genetic. That night marked the beginning of something the palace had never seen, a courtship built on mutual awkwardness and radical honesty. Nessa taught the princesses to propagate succulence, and they taught her to read emotional luminescence. She showed them Earth movies, badly translated romantic comedies that made no sense in luminary context. They showed her memory crystals of their father, his terrible singing, his worst dancing, his beautiful ordinariness. Queen Mother Celestria watched from a distance, glowing approval gold whenever she saw them together. The whisper, now transformed into something gentler, drifted through the palace like a guardian rather than a threat, reminding everyone that grief and joy could coexist, but the kingdom itself struggled with the change. The council demands an explanation, Torvin warned Nessa one morning, a human bonding with royal daughters. It's unprecedented. They're calling emergency sessions. Let them call, came Celestria's voice from the doorway. She entered the archive with regal grace, but her eyes were warm. I've spent 15 years letting protocol dictate my life. I'm done. If my daughters have found happiness, I'll burn the council chambers before I let anyone take it away. Your Majesty, Torvin began. They can accept it, or they can retire, Celestria said firmly, then softer to Nessa, though I am curious. In human terms, what are your intentions toward my daughters? Nessa, who'd been trying to become invisible behind a data crystal, squeaked. We're taking it slow. Good. Slow is good. Celestria smiled. Fast is how mistakes happen. Slow is how gardens grow. 6 months became a year. The council grumbled but couldn't argue with results. The queen was governing again, actively, joyfully. The princesses were thriving. The palace itself seemed lighter, its bioluminescent systems glowing brighter than they had in decades. Nessa moved from the storage room quarters to a suite in the garden tower, where she could see the greenhouse from her window. She learned to speak luminary, badly, with an accent that made children giggle but comprehensibly. She learned their customs, their histories, their songs, and the princesses learned hers. Stellara developed an obsession with earth music, particularly off-key folk songs. Moonveil discovered a talent for human cooking and made increasingly elaborate attempts at pasta that sometimes worked. They learned each other's languages, not just words, but the grammar of touch, the syntax of silence, the vocabulary of presence. I need to tell you something, Stellara said one evening as they worked in the greenhouse together. Her luminescence had gone deep blue, nervousness. Our bonding traditions, they're different from human marriage. Nessa looked up from the fern she was repotting. Different how? Moonveil joined them, her silver eyes serious. Luminaries bond in threes. Historically, 2 partners and a witness who becomes family. It's about building networks, not couples, creating support structures stronger than any pair alone. So you're saying, Nessa's heart hammered. We're saying both of us, Stellara clarified. Not choosing between us, but both, if you're willing. If that's not too strange. My neighbors on Terra Firma 8 were a triad, Nessa interrupted. 3 women who ran a vertical farm together. Best relationship I ever saw. They had this rotation system for who cooked, who managed finances, who planned date nights. It was incredibly organized and kind of beautiful. Moonveil's skin flashed hope silver. So you're not opposed? I'm terrified, Nessa admitted. I barely know how to relationship with one person, let alone 2 royal aliens. But I'm not opposed. I need to know you're sure. That this isn't some rebound from grief, or... Stellara took her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, electric. We've been sure since you told the whisper it deserved to exist. Since you made our mother laugh. Since you hummed terrible songs to dying plants and cried when they bloomed. We're sure because you're not trying to save us, Moonveil added, taking her other hand. You're just showing up. Every day. messy and honest and impossibly brave. The starflower beside them blazed so bright it cast their joined shadows on the greenhouse ceiling. 3 figures, overlapping, becoming one composite shape. "Okay," Nessa whispered. "Okay, yes. Let's try." The bonding ceremony happened during the next triple moon alignment, in the greenhouse where everything had begun. Queen Mother Celestria officiated, wearing robes of gold and midnight blue, glowing brighter than she had in 20 years. The Whisper attended too, a gentle presence that wrapped around the gathering like a protective veil. There were no crowds, just Torvin, the head gardener, a few close palace staff who'd watched the whole strange courtship unfold. Nessa wore a simple dress she'd brought from Earth, green as new leaves. The princesses wore traditional bonding robes woven from threads that captured and held light. The ceremony was in Luminary, but Celestria translated key phrases. "Do you promise to tend each other as gardens? To provide water in drought, space in abundance, pruning when needed, and patience always?" "We do," the 3 of them said together. "Do you promise to let grief exist alongside joy? To remember that growth requires both sun and shadow?" "We do." "Then, by the light of 3 moons and the roots that bind all living things, I recognize this bond. May you grow wild. May you grow deep. May you grow together." The starflower erupted with golden light so intense it turned night to day. Every plant in the greenhouse bloomed simultaneously. Roses, ferns, vines, impossible flowers from 6 diff,